Welcome to Rewiring Health, your hub for transformation and empowerment. I'm your host, Kelly Kessler, and I'm here to guide you in aligning with your true self. Discover the freedom and vibrancy within you as we release patterns of self-abandonment and transcend the health impacts of stress. Get ready to unlock your potential and embrace the freedom and vitality you've been seeking. Now let's dive in. This conversation with Dr. Tony Nader is needed more now than ever. When we look around us, it can feel like our lives are filled with turmoil, conflict, and tension. But yet, if we were to understand it all from a higher level of consciousness, we would have a very different perspective and greater understanding of what is truly truth within us. And that is why I'm so honored to have Dr. Tony Nader on the podcast today. Dr. Tony Nader is a Harvard-trained medical doctor and MIT neuroscientist, globally recognized for his groundbreaking work in consciousness, human potential, and the mind-body connection. As the global leader of the Transcendental Meditation Organization and president of the Maharishi International University, Dr. Nader integrates ancient Vedic wisdom with modern science to promote healing, resilience, and inner transformation. A New York Times bestselling author, his latest book, Consciousness is All There Is, explores the deep relationship between consciousness, physiology, and health. Dr. Nader's insights offer a powerful and practical foundation for reclaiming wellness from within. It was such an honor and pleasure to speak with Dr. Tony Nader, and I hope this conversation leaves you with a greater understanding of your truth and how to live life from a place of wholeness and love. All right, welcome to Rewiring Health. I am so incredibly honored to be joined by Dr. Tony Nader. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Kelly. It's wonderful to be with you.
Absolutely. And I am so excited. I've been looking forward to this conversation because there's so much value in everything you share. And I really believe it's going to help people just experience life in such a tremendous way. So one thing I want to start with is something that you wrote in your book because it really stood out to me and just really gave me so much insight to seeing things differently. And what you wrote is consciousness is the most fundamental aspect of life, as roots are fundamental to the life of a tree. When you water the tree's roots, you enrich every aspect of the tree. And that stuck out to me so much because so often we are trying to model and change things in our life, like our body, our career, more education, and we're exhaustively trying to change so much of life. But are we missing a huge piece if we're not addressing the idea of consciousness within all that?
Indeed, this is really a key point, and that goes back to what is the reality of life, in fact, and what I am proposing in this book, Consciousness is All There is that consciousness is primary and that it's consciousness that appears as matter. And there are many logics for that that are explained and discussed and went into great detail from different angles, different perspectives, philosophically, scientifically, logically, and even empirically, experientially. And so, what we have is a field of being that is the source of all our thinking, our behavior, our feelings, our relations, and we are forgetting it because, like the the roots that are hidden under the ground, we don't see them. But of course, the roots we kind of remember to water the tree because every day we know that if there is no water on the roots, the tree will not blossom. But in our life, we have forgotten because our senses project us outwards all the time. We have forgotten that there is something more fundamental within us that we can enrich. And science has shown, actual research has shown, that when you water that root of life, when you improve your consciousness, when you get in touch with your inner deep self, and you expand that perspective, perception of who you are, and your ability to be sharp and clear, then all aspects of life improve.
Yeah, and that's what I found just so profound because it seems like we're always constantly like grasping at straws, but if we can just recognize that aspect, I mean, everything else raises up with that. Is that, you talk about that's something that, we're not maybe aware of. Is that something that we maybe are born with and we understand consciousness better and we kind of lose it or it fades away or gets resisted? What happens throughout our life that that's not more of a natural aspect of our understanding?
There are two aspects here. We are conscious beings, and through consciousness, we experience everything. We experience happiness, we experience sadness, we experience joys, we experience knowledge, love. Everything that we experience happens through consciousness. So we have consciousness, but we take it for granted that it's something which happens to us or which is somewhere, somehow there. Our sense of self, our sense of being, our sense of continuity in life is something that is so natural and so habitual, if you like, that we think it's something that we take for granted that we have, and that's what it is. And now science has discovered, and the ancient knowledge of yoga and meditation and ancient practices have discovered and explained that actually consciousness can be nourished, can be nurtured, can be expanded, and that we become aware of it. So there is being conscious, and that is being conscious of the importance of consciousness. So being conscious we are, because without being conscious there is nothing that has any meaning. You
Yeah.
know, if you imagine that somebody is in deep anesthesia, even though in deep anesthesia, and I go into that, there is some level of consciousness that is maintained, but let's say for the sake of the example, you are in anesthesia. How much does it matter to you if your life is lived under deep anesthesia? How much does it matter to you to be the wealthiest person, the most loved person, the most knowledgeable person? It doesn't mean anything. You just don't practically exist. So, consciousness is really true existence, true being, is lived, experienced, um, enjoyed, and able to manifest and act and do things through consciousness.
Yeah, beautiful. And what role does ego play in that, where we view ourselves as separate from so many people and we're comparing each other and we're in competition? How does that play a role in all this, where we can maybe not feel like we are part of one consciousness?
Well, this comes from a misunderstanding of the reality of life. We think that there is some energy that can split around and made particles, and then the particles come together, and then they make molecules. Molecules come together, they create cells, and cells go together and create organs, and then more complexification and more advancement in orderliness and complex structures and relationships create a nervous system. And then we think, okay, this is my personal individual reality. That's who I am. That's all what I am. And therefore, I am different from everything else. The proof is they are separate from me. I can see void between us on the surface level. So, this understanding is actually questioned and actually is wrong about the reality of the interconnectedness that is there at much deeper levels and layers of life, and that we are part of a web of being, a web of existence. In fact, we are part of this unbounded consciousness. I usually take the analogy of an ocean because metaphors help more sometimes than intellectual
Mhm.
analysis. You have an image and then you can see what it is. So you imagine an ocean that is infinite and that has its different layers. Some are deeply silent within. And as you go higher and higher, you reach the surface level, and there you get the waves in the oceans. So the waves are different, of course, on the surface level. And imagine you are a wave or you are sitting on one wave, and your vision allows you only to see that wave. So you are limited in your perspective, and you see that one wave and you are scared of the other waves probably, and you feel different. You want to protect yourself as an individual wave. But now if you dive deeper into your true self, into the ocean, you find that you are actually an expression of the ocean. And so you truly are the ocean, not just the wave. And so this is where you realize that ultimately everything is yourself. Every other wave is part of your reality as the ocean, although you still have your individuality, your ego on the surface level. So it really depends on where you place your consciousness, where you place yourself. You place yourself on a narrow surface level of being, that is the wave, and not only the wave, a limited wave, which doesn't see beyond its limited values. And so when another wave comes, or there is a splash, or there is a wind, or something, it is threatened, it's afraid, because it's like that. Or you can have still the wave, but the wave connected to the ocean. So your consciousness actually is aware that you are more than the surface value, and there is something deeper within you. Now, this is a nice kind of, hopefully nice kind
Mhm.
of idea and presentation, but it is experimentally shown, it's empirically demonstrated through scientific research that people who practice, for example, transcendental meditation, which is a technique to go beyond the surface level, they go within themselves and they discover that they have a much greater reality, much more expanded, much more fulfilling, much more settled, much more peaceful than the surface waves. And so they anchor themselves in the ocean itself. And then you have all the benefits that come from it and that have been studied scientifically that show greater balance, greater intelligence, better decision making. Even the body is healthier, more dynamic, more performing, more creative, and behavior improves, and relation with others naturally, spontaneously improve because spontaneously one feels, even sometimes without analyzing it and even without realizing why it is so, one spontaneously feels connected to others.
Mhm. Amazing. And can you go into that a little bit more about transcendental meditation and what does that look like and how do we start to integrate that into our lives?
There are different types of meditation. Meditation is something that deals with the mind. This is, whatever technique you use of the mind, you can say this is a kind of meditation. And so there are physical techniques that are different. So you exercise, dietary things you do and like that. These are physical, what you do on the surface level of the body and maintaining the body, and they are important and very good. But there are techniques of the mind. And so there are many techniques of the mind. Some are contemplative techniques, which you inspire your thoughts to go in a certain direction, to experience whatever memories you have, or to think of nice projects or nice ideas or proverbs or whatever concepts, feelings of love, of harmony, of peace. This is just on the surface level of the ocean, but you go a little deeper because you start to feel some kind of connectedness between things. So these are like the contemplative techniques, or what they call mindfulness techniques. Mindfulness techniques is you just sit and take it easy and examine some aspect of your physiology. You are mindful of your breathing. So you imagine how you're breathing, or you see how you're breathing, breath coming in, breath coming out. You're non judgmental. Or you think about your thoughts. So a thought comes, you observe it from a distance, you don't analyze it or be judgmental about it. But all of these stay on the surface level. They get you a little bit deeper because you're settling down, and instead of the mind jumping around, you're helping it to stay on some point or something. There is an element here also of a little bit of concentration, even though you are told not to focus, not to force the mind if it goes away. But there is some element of staying on the surface because you're analyzing one aspect or the other of your surface being, of breathing, of thinking, etc. Transcending is very different. The term transcending or transcendental means to go beyond. And so the technique of transcendental meditation is to go beyond the surface level. And so there is a technique which one learns. There is a specific sound we call a mantra that helps on the path to go inward. But the going inward happens by the nature of life, the nature of the mind, which is always to seek greater happiness, greater charm, greater fulfillment. That's what we are always doing. But we usually do that through our senses, projecting outside. We want to see beautiful things, to hear beautiful things. We want to be loved. We want knowledge. But this is always on the outside. In transcendental meditation, we take the inward direction and allow the mind, like we said on the ocean, to dive deep. Now, the diving happens by itself, there is no effort whatsoever. And the reason is that the inner values are more charming and more fulfilling. So it's enough to put one on the path and give them some hints of what to do if thought comes, what to do if this happens, what to do if that is going on, how do you use this sound that has no meaning, the mantra. Then you will find yourself, and people do even from the very first sittings, they find themselves diving deep and transcending, which means going beyond memories and feelings and thoughts and experiences. And they go where? Towards the self. So, what do they experience? They experience consciousness devoid of specific thoughts. This is transcending. Transcending is to go to what we call pure consciousness, which is that ocean that we're talking about, where all the waves are settled and they settling down, and you are now with your true self, because this is your true inner being, your true inner self, where you are connected with everything and everyone.
Amazing. And going into that further, so many people who listen to my podcast have struggle with like that inner voice of the negativity and just, I'm not enough, I'm not lovable and all that. How does this work as far as like for someone who maybe is like, oh, I've tried meditation, or they like haven't had much success in quieting their minds? Can you talk about, for that person who's like, okay, this sounds amazing. How do I get to a point where I can actually be in that place of stillness?
It's very, very simple. You have to learn it in a systematic way. That's why we have a personal instruction, and
Mhm.
then you have days of checking and follow up and verification to make sure you're doing it correctly. And what you really will learn ultimately is how to not make any effort, how not to try, how not to force, how to be innocent, how to be simple, how to be natural. We all forgotten this in a sense. And so it is by trying harder that you get more difficulties and more obstacles. And but there is a system to do it. And so even and mostly for those whose mind is very creative and bubbling around, and they call it the monkey mind in certain traditions or ways of talking about it, is jumping around, jumping around. If they learn this technique, you will find that they settle completely easily and simply. Again, a metaphor. You see
Yeah.
a honeybee. A
Mhm.
honeybee is buzzing around, and you listen to the buzzing, 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 buzzing. And then suddenly it's quiet.
Mhm.
It is quiet because it has found the nectar, it has found the flower. Then it just sits there and takes the flower. If you try to force the honeybee, even try to force it to go on the flower, it will buzz around and be angry and will be going
Mhm.
all over the place.
Yeah.
If you just give it something that is attractive, something that is enriching, something that is charming, something that is amazing, then it just stops. And
Mhm.
we are like that. And our mind shifts automatically without any effort from one focus onto another, guided by its nature. And its nature is always to want more pleasure, more happiness, more joy, more fulfillment, more knowledge, more love, all the things that are fulfilling. And of course, we want to overcome stress, overcome tiredness, overcome fatigue, but this all in the right direction of getting greater happiness, greater harmony, and greater peace. And so, we can take another example, which we always and many teachers use, those who teach transcendental meditation. Suppose you're reading a book, and the book is mildly interesting, but not so interesting. And you go through passages where it's attractive and your attention is there. And then suddenly maybe the book goes through some passage which is not so interesting, and a music starts that you like next door.
Mhm.
Your intention is to read the book, so you're reading the book, but you suddenly find that your mind is with the music as if you're reading the letters, but it's not recording, it's not connecting, it's not uh, being aware of what are in these lines. Your mind has shifted to some more interesting area.
Mhm.
Now, did you do any effort to do that? Absolutely not, because you didn't even know, and you didn't try, and you didn't force it. It just shifted automatically. So what we're saying here, and this is the experience of millions of people who practice transcendental meditation, is that the inner value of being is so much more charming than anything, that when
Mhm.
you get that attention inward, your mind stop buzzing and automatically it settles down. And then you discover something very, very deep and charming inside. I can tell you a story of something that always touched me and I feel is really wonderful to know.
Yeah.
Transcendental meditation is really for great leaders and achievers, and it's for success in life and for performance, etc. But we have also used it and tried it in rehabilitation. So we had a program for prisoners who, some of them were very, serious criminals and have done serious things.
Mhm.
And most of their reports, but I like one of them just as a real example. I can't give names, of course, but that person was, a high level, high security prisoner and criminal, and he learned transcendental meditation. His rehabilitation went so good that he was able to be released and not to have any return, recidivism. And we have studied this not only on one person, we have studied recidivism in people who are in prisons, and it's much, much, much reduced. But that's not the point.
Mhm.
The point is what he said. What he said was, I identified myself as a criminal, as a bad person. All I knew is that I am bad since I've lived in such circumstances that I've been scolded, I've been always doing things. So I identified myself with being a bad person. And therefore it felt natural for me to do bad things
Mhm.
because that's who I felt I am. And when I learned transcendental meditation, I discovered something within me that I never thought was there.
Mhm.
I discovered peace. I discovered a quiet, peaceful, harmonious, soft person.
Mhm.
And that changed my entire life and my entire perception of who I am. And so, those people who have these limiting beliefs, those who have been told things when they are young or have had bad experiences and attach themselves to the surface value of life, which is those values that have happened, they are going to be tossed around and, limiting themselves and thinking of themselves like that. And this is one of the beauty of transcendental meditation, of transcending all these values, going beyond. That's what transcending means. They go beyond that and they actually find and experience within themselves that field of harmony and peace that is different than the labels they have put on themselves. And
Mhm.
then direct experience, it's much more powerful than intellectual conviction. You tell somebody, oh no, you're a good person, but you're a
Mhm.
nice person, you've been through this, but the
Yeah.
person doesn't really believe you because they have to experience it. And
Mhm.
when they experience it within and they see their life outside change, then this is how we can really make a difference. And this is not just for, of course, prisoners or criminals or like that. Every one of us has some limiting beliefs. Every one of us has had some negative things. They're not sure or insecure and feeling this and feeling that because the perception of themselves is narrow, is small, is based on just surface level of experience.
Mhm. Yeah, so powerful. And thank you so much for sharing that story because even though we may not identify as a prisoner, like we could identify as that perfectionist, that people pleaser, or maybe not feeling good enough. And so it's like you can see how once you start to learn that that's not your true identity, that how everything else can change. And it's so powerful. And I just really appreciate you sharing that. One thing that really stuck out to me in your book as well is the examples that you shared of just a small percentage of a population engaging in transcendental meditation and the effects that it had in some in many situations. Can you talk about that as far as like crime and all those things that were dramatically affected by people engaging this?
Absolutely. This is really comes also as a support even to the paradigm that consciousness is primary, but
Mhm.
at the same time as an effect of it, as a result of this fact of transcending and being together. So it has both values. So we're saying there is an ocean and there are waves. If you act on the level of the waves, you can have clashes between the waves. Again, it's a metaphor on the surface level. But if you dive deep within the ocean and you enliven that unity value, because it's not only you as a wave who discover you are the ocean, but when other waves also discover they are the ocean, then you and the others are intimately and automatically feeling as similar, as the same, as unified, as one. And that is really on a consciousness level, not just an intellectual understanding. I think we need the intellect so to know what is the experience and what happens. But it's not on the level of convincing or on the level of talking on the outside. It's on the level of being.
Mhm.
And it's really about the collective consciousness in a society. This is a term that we use that is very important also to understand in terms of trying to explain why this phenomenon of effect of a small percentage of people practicing transcendental meditation and leading to decrease in crime, decrease in accidents of the road, etc., which we can talk more about. But the background for it is that there is this ocean, there are these waves, and depending on where the consciousness of the individuals in society is, then this is where the action and reaction and decision making and fighting or not fighting is on the
Mhm.
surface level. Which means if society, let's take it this way, if society is stressed, if individuals in a society are stressed, that's more simple, more
Mhm.
direct.
Mhm.
If individuals in society are stressed, and what does it mean stressed? It means they're working on the surface level. They are just jumping around on the surface level. They are chaotic. That is what stress is. They're not settled, they're not harmonious. If few individuals are, or a lot of individuals are stressed in society, then there is a tendency for more crime, for more accidents of the roads. People are nervous, people are tense, they do wrong things, they make wrong decisions, accidents happen, problems happen, health is not so good. And if people are settled and a society is at peace, obviously there will be less accidents and people will make right decisions.
Mhm.
Now, the question is how many people should be settling down and at peace in order for society to have a sense of change or improvement.
Mhm.
In the 1960s, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who is the founder of this program and who understands this field of consciousness as being primary, and who knows that when a number of people, a small number of people, settle down and go to the depths of the ocean, the collective awareness settles down also by that much. And so he predicted that when 1% of the population of any city practice transcendental meditation, there will be a reduction in crime or reduction of violence. So the scientists went around and just found which cities have 1% practicing transcendental meditation compared to cities that don't have 1%. And they found that crime rates were reduced in those cities. Now, somebody might say, oh, maybe because those cities were already peaceful and that's why they like transcendental meditation, and therefore it's not a proof of cause and effect. But since then, we have done systematically 116 different research studies on this phenomenon, which we call the Maharishi effect in honor of the Maharishi who actually predicted it. And we have found systematically that even by predicting it and telling the scientists, we are going to do this experiment. And by the way, there were more advanced techniques that Maharishi has brought, which we call the siddhis, which means a technique that comes from the ancient knowledge of yoga, but yoga of the mind, where you practice this very profound settling down of transcendental meditation, but you learn how to be in that ocean longer and to have these experiences. It's a more advanced program. But what it has done is reduce the number required from 1% to the square root of 1%. So, for example, in the 1990s, beginning 1990s, we thought, let's make a big proof. And we called the scientists and told them, we're going to do an experiment. Where will you do it? Where? We said we do it in Washington, D.C., because it had high crime and there were difficulties in the government, and there were, the government was not able to make, to have the assignment for the different secretaries and for constituting, whatever is needed. There were many problems, and the whole thing is published, so I don't need to go into real details now. It's just one example, but it's very striking. And we said that we expect that we might reduce crime by as much as 20%. And the scientists said it would take a huge weather change, like a storm with 2 meters of snow, to see a 20% reduction. And this is unlikely because it was actually in the summer. And so they said it will never happen. This will never happen, but we are happy to watch and see what you do. So we came there. I was there. I was one of those who participated. And we practiced this program together. And there was 25% decrease in crime. There was also reduction in accidents of the roads. There were reduction in other negative indicators. And actually, scientifically, the Journal of Conflict Resolution felt compelled to publish it. They said, we don't understand how it works, but the statistics are so good and so clear. And the scientists who did the statistics and who were already told that this is going to happen and who were watching it, not something like retroactive, but proactive, thinking prospectively towards the future, and declaring it, announcing it, and seeing the results. They published it in a very big way. And like this, we have many, many studies in different parts of the world, different regions of the world, where when large groups come together, because this advanced technique requires only square root of 1%, which is much, much less than 1% of people practicing the regular meditation. And we have seen the same results. A longitudinal study in the US, which compared the number of people practicing transcendental meditation or its advanced techniques, the siddhi program, together with respect to many other factors, have shown unequivocal transformations in very many important factors. Some of them are crime, rape, drug problems, drug-related deaths, accidents of the roads, infant mortality, hospital admission, violence of all kinds. And it's very, very dramatic when you see the graphs. And why is this? Because when a number of people settle down, the collective consciousness settles down, and then people are clearer, they make right decision, and they don't go into difficulties for themselves or cause difficulties to others.
It's so empowering to hear you speak about that because we can look at the news and be like, okay, well, how do we handle this? How do we stop this? And you can feel very powerless. But hearing this, it just starts within. We can just take our own action and realize that we have so much more power within us when we allow ourselves to get into that space and be settled ourselves, that then we can influence so many others. So it's so empowering to hear you speak about that and see the statistics and the data and the science behind it. It's not just theoretical. There's a real application to this. So I so appreciate you sharing that and just hearing that and recognizing that within us, we all have that power to change and transform our reality. So
Well, thank you for allowing me to do that. It's
Mhm.
wonderful to spread the news because we've been even offering to governments solutions to the problems, and these solutions based on consciousness.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, society today is all about material and matter, and everything is surface value and everything is material. And the scientists, because of superstitions and different things, have gone away from this field of being, this field of consciousness. It became kind of esoteric or, supernatural and all of that. And what we are reestablishing, what I like to really tell everyone is that it is natural. It's not like a miracle where we don't understand how it works. It's not like a supernatural power where you can have intervention from something we don't understand. It is natural, it is real, but it deals with the reality of life, which is consciousness. And
Mhm.
that is something, debatable by certain scientists because theoretically you can have different ideas of what the nature of life is. But that's what I like to defend in my book and my talks and my discussions is that there is a strong, very strong evidence and logic and reasoning that converges from different parts, including from the ultimate findings in physics, where they find a unified field, including from empirical research that is like the research we just talked about for the individual and for society. Improving consciousness changes your health, your mind, your body. It even changes your society. There is a logical and philosophical argument about it, about the reality of what is matter, what is consciousness, how they interact, and which one creates the other, etc. So all of these converging evidence is what I like to share and present through this book so that people have a different option, at least, to think about what reality is about. Because if reality is only material and surface and physical, then you can grab what you can grab, you can do what you can do, you can fight, you can kill, as long as you don't get caught, you are fine. And but this is not going to lead to happiness. This is not going to lead to stable society. This is not going to lead to growth and evolution in the right ways. This is not going to allow us to overcome the challenges of artificial intelligence, of genetic engineering, of the climate, etc. It is in consciousness, because consciousness is the real thing. It is through consciousness that we live our life. What does it matter if you are the wealthiest person, but you have no consciousness, or your consciousness is limited and you are miserable? What does it do to you? So you realize that consciousness is primary, is important from so many perspectives, and the solution can come from consciousness. It empowers us, as you said, it really does
Yeah.
empower us as a being, somebody sitting in their room and transcending. They can help society, I would say, even more than going out in the street and raising things and yelling and shouting and dividing.
Absolutely. And your book does such a good job just giving that thoroughness to it. There's so many aspects that you share, and I really appreciate all the perspectives because it's not only the science, but you can see the application in that. And so it's just it really shares the story of how powerful it is. One thing I want to ask you, because I think this is something, that will really resonate with people, is like when we're going through some really hard challenges and like really emotionally, depleting. How does our awareness of consciousness help us navigate those so that we can maybe see it from a different perspective and have an expanded perspective on what we're actually experiencing?
I like metaphors.
I love metaphors. They do help.
You are a person who needs some money and you go to the bank
Mhm,
and you ask for $1,000. Okay, they'll see you have $1,000. They give you $1,000, you owe that money to the bank.
mhm,
And so you go around and now you invest your money properly and you become a millionaire.
mhm,
Now, the $1,000 you have to take care of, you have to pay to the bank, but you're now a millionaire, so $1,000 is not a big deal. You pay it without a problem. The other thing is you have $1,000 that you owe, but you have not invested it properly. And you come and the bank comes to you, and now paying the $1,000, you don't have the money. It's a stress, it's a strain, it's huge, it's big, it's a mountain. Even just $1,000, but you don't have it. And so for the same $1,000, you can be in a different position. Now, this is a metaphor, so it's talking about material value on the surface. But what I want to lead to is about your consciousness. If your awareness, your creativity, your ability to handle something in a broader perspective, and to be able to take a step back and know that you are the ocean and that any wave you can handle, it will be much easier for you to overcome no matter what problem you face. Now, think of the day when you wake up having slept well in the night. Just a simple example. You slept well in the night and you're rested, you're clear, and then some problems happen, some challenges are there. But you are clear, you are strong. You can overcome them, you can see them, you can take a distance from them, and you can solve them. And actually, you find that things work for you better. But the day when you have not slept well, when you are tired and stressed and afraid and fatigued, the same problem, exactly the same problem, becomes like a mountain and you're overwhelmed by it. Now, some might say, I know my problem is a big problem. I have, it's huge. I mean, people have things, they have diseases, they have financial issues, and they are real, and they have to deal with them. What I'm saying is, with what strength, with what clarity, with what energy, with what power, with what creativity are you able to deal with the situation?
mhm,
This is where consciousness comes into play.
mhm,
If your consciousness is broad, that means you are going to be able to see a greater number of variables, a greater number of possibilities, a greater number of solutions. If your consciousness is narrow, which happens when you are tired and stressed, then you have this tunnel vision, what we call tunnel vision. And this is again scientific. Like we know that pilots, for example, when they come to land a plane, if they are not having broad comprehension and they are not well trained at the beginning, the pilots, they get really narrow vision. They just start seeing just one or two things and they forget about important other things. And then they can get stressed and they can crash their life. And this happens. This happens in the 70s. I won't mention this specific flight, but there was a flight that was happening, and there was a little button that was not lighting properly. It was going off, and on and off and on. And pilots have put the plane in autopilot and they just started having a narrow vision and stressing about this little bulb that is lighting on and off. Why is it doing that? Is there something wrong? This and that. And normally, of course, they should do that. But what they forgot is to fly the plane. And the autopilot went off because of their agitation. And actually, it was a crash with a huge number of uh, casualties and actually fatalities. So they have forgotten to fly the plane because they are overwhelmed by this one narrow perspective. So in our life, we should not forget to fly our life, to manage our life from a broad perspective, broad comprehension. And that we can do if we have broader awareness, broader consciousness. And we know scientifically how it works. When you're under stress, the blood flow goes to the parts in the brain that are for the flight or fight response or freeze response, one of the three things that we have in the jungle, because you are, under stress situation. So you just stop thinking from a holistic perspective, from a grand perspective. This means you have narrowed your consciousness, you have narrowed your awareness. And these are concepts we have to actually get used to, that our consciousness can be narrow and can be wide, can be broad comprehension.
Yeah.
So, in terms of flying, for example, the Federal Aviation Association Administration, FAA, decided since those times that pilots have to be trained. Fly the plane first, keep broad comprehension, situational awareness. They say this, and then you deal with the thing. So there are systematic trainings so that the brain doesn't shut down under these things.
Yeah.
And pilots have been trained in transcendental meditation. The
Yeah.
Swedish Air Force, for example, for some time was training its pilots because they were able to have broad comprehension, yet ability to focus and concentrate. So, for the person who is facing difficulties, know that you can face the difficulties with you being small or the same difficulties with you being big. What does it mean, you being big? Means you having broader awareness, and then you will find solutions, you'll get over it, and you will able to meet any challenge and overcome any obstacle.
Amazing. Would this be also relational into like you have a challenge and then a few years later, when the challenge happened, it was like very jolting. But a few years later, you're like, oh, I'm so glad that happened because I've had this expansion. Is that also that expanded consciousness where you can now see why that challenge was in your life and how it helped you grow from it?
It's a beautiful point. Yeah. You know, many things that happen to us are a lesson that we learn from
Mhm.
and able to overcome. And the challenges also help us to grow. It's not a punishment necessarily. We face a challenge, and it helps us if we go through it in the right way to actually overcome it and feel we are bigger, we are stronger, we are capable. And that gives happiness and joy. And it can turn out that these challenges that we are facing are actually something that was good for us. You know, again, extreme examples, they're not necessarily everybody's everyday's experience, but suppose you go to take a plane and then you miss the plane because there was something on the road that was an accident by somebody, and you are late to the plane and the plane went away. And you are, oh, it's terrible. Of course, it's terrible in some ways, but maybe there is a reason why you should stay behind. In the worst case, suppose some accident happens with the plane. Now, this is an extreme example, and one can laugh at it that it's not our day to day experience. But sometimes extreme examples also alert us to there are things that happen that end up, being good for us. For example, the relationship doesn't work with somebody and you are disappointed, but maybe it's not the best thing for you. Maybe you'll find later, as you said, that as you grow in experience and knowledge, that this wasn't really the best thing for you. And so we have to take also that aspect into consideration. It doesn't mean we have to just surrender to everything and not be proactive and not desire things. We have to desire, we have to live, we have to expect, we have to plan. We have things, want things to happen for us the way we plan them.
Mhm.
But we have to have enough distance and lack of over attachment to things at the same time when we're working for them. So, in
Mhm.
this ancient wisdom of yoga, for example, and meditation and transcending and all of that, it is said that one has the ability to control one's actions, but the results of one's actions are not determined only by your actions. They're determined by circumstances, by things in the environment, by your past actions that lead to something. And so you do the best under every circumstance, but you shouldn't feel disappointed or attached if the results are not exactly as you wanted them.
Mhm.
Once you've done from your side the best, then you are getting the best under the circumstances. And then it's a good wise way to go. And but for that you have to have broad comprehension, broad awareness, so you can see why and how things happen to you. And it's very personal and can only be understood from a person under a certain circumstance,
Mhm.
and depending of course on their level of awareness, of ability to see different variables and different contributing factors.
Amazing. Is that that power of like surrendering to trusting that the universe has your best interest in mind and that it's always working for you in the process?
Yes, you can say that, but you have to also do something from your side, you have to
Absolutely,
be
yes,
alert.
action.
You have to be
Mhm.
alert.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know if you know the joke about the person who was, in love with God and praying to God, and one day there was a flood in the city.
Mhm.
And then he was, or she, whatever, was in the house. And then the water was rising. So somebody came with a bicycle, said, "Come, come, I take you on my bicycle." They said, "No, God will save me." Then somebody came with a
Mhm.
car, said, "No, I don't go, but God will save me." The water went up. Somebody came with a boat. And I said, "No, no, I won't go. God will save me." Then went on the top of the roof. A
Mhm.
helicopter came, said, "No, God will save me." But then he passed away and went to heaven and asked God, "What happened? I
Mhm.
prayed for you all my life. You didn't save me." And so God said, "I don't know what happened. I sent you a bicycle, a car, a
Yes.
boat, and a helicopter."
Yeah, yes, I love that example. And that's like in that when we practice transcendental meditation, are we able to decipher what those are, those pathways? Like, do we gain better intuition and insight into, oh, we were supposed to say yes to that, and take that action?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And I said that to say that, when we say that the universe has your best interest,
Hmm.
is that we have to be able to see what the universe telling us
Hmm.
also.
Yeah.
So the universe tell you something, but if you ignore it, even if it's for your best interest, but you ignored it, and so, well, you might not get the best result. And so
Hmm.
we have to be also taking our life into our hands. We have to be the master of our destiny and not say, okay, God will do it or nature will do it. Well, nature will help, will do it. But if you don't take up the opportunities, if you don't make decisions that are in the right way, if you are not clear in your mind and you are not having a broader understanding and broader consciousness, you're going to make decisions that are not necessarily the best.
Yeah, and that's it goes off like one of my favorite quotes from Einstein, no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. And that really is it's so powerful because then you can see really how your life can change once you do change your consciousness or your the
Exactly.
level of that. For
Yes.
someone who's listening and they really want to embrace this in their life, what is the first step they can take to start to expand their consciousness and move forward?
I think learn transcendental meditation. This is really what for me has been the eye opener the understanding how important it is to develop one's consciousness, but also basically for sleeping better, for reducing blood pressure, for, uh, you know, uh, we don't want to make claims, but, there is endless research that shows the benefits of transcendental meditation. Of course, you have to take care of yourself medically whenever it's needed, but something that will support you, that will help you, that will guide you as an immediate way to really dive within yourself and find yourself, I think one can learn transcendental meditation. We have programs, teachers all over the world, in the US, in every big city. You can check out on tm.org, TM for Transcendental Meditation.org, and then you can learn there. There are books, but you don't learn from the books. They inspire you, they get you to have more philosophical understanding and all of that, which is wonderful to have because then you understand what you're going through. But it's the practice that makes the difference.
Absolutely. And for someone who wanted to connect with you and learn more about you and your practices, how can they connect with you?
I have a website, drtonynader.com, drtonynader.com, like that. And whenever you come to any programs of what we have, for example, we have a university, Maharishi International University in Fairfield, Iowa. I recently became the president of the university. It offers programs all the way to the PhD level, acknowledged and accredited by the accrediting committees and organizations in the US. It has produced wonderful students who have gone on to be leaders in society, to take degrees from the top universities around the country. And it teaches this consciousness-based education, which is education to develop the full value of the individual, not just to give them information that they can put on a piece of paper at the end of the year
Yeah.
to pass the test. So
Mhm.
this is also wonderful. I inspire everyone and every student to check out Maharishi International University, MIU.
Amazing. I will put everything in the show notes. And I just want to thank you so much for everything you shared today. There's so much value and wisdom in everything. And I know it's going to plant that seed into someone's mind to really expand on that and transform their lives. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Kelly. You're amazing. It was delightful to be with you.
Yes, I really enjoyed it. And again, for anyone listening, share this episode with anyone who can really benefit from it. And, just again, share those messages. You can clearly see the power in being able to practice this for the higher good of everyone. So thank you so much again. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. If there was something in this episode that really resonated with you or a message that stuck with you, please share it with someone else. It's only through sharing these messages that we can start to rewire our minds to feel empowered and live the life that we truly desire. Please subscribe so you never miss an episode. And again, thank you so much for tuning in to Rewiring Health.